The House Leader for a Third Party has now got the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm actually going to just dovetail a little bit on what my colleague from Vancouver-Langara was asking about, just with respect to the Indigenous jurisdiction and child welfare, since this has kind of been the tone here. The member mentioned fiscal supports, and I think want to just I don't think that the minister answered the question, and I think I'd just like to add this context to it. We have a situation in this province where those that are engaged in the process, those who have the resources to engage in the process, will be the ones that show up and be working with the federal and the provincial government in order to do it. Those that don't will be lamenting the fact that they don't have the resources to do it. It won't be an indication that they don't want to engage in this process. It will not. It should not be seen as these are the nations that want to do it, these are the nations, the remainder don't. So unless there is a fiscal framework that allows for the resources to be put in place in order to do the incredible bureaucratic processes, administrative processes that are required in order to do it, we're going to have a situation where those that have, those that don't are going to fall further behind and will lament the fact that their children are still in care. The provincial government will continue to celebrate the fact that X number of nations are involved. What is the fiscal relationship with Indigenous nations, all of them, more than 175 Indigenous nations in this province, so that then they can also be able to engage in this process and gain jurisdiction over their child welfare programs?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. So Canada has funding for capacity building that is available for any nation in British Columbia that wants to start building capacity in order to start this pathway towards jurisdiction. So they have made available funding for any nation for work on capacity building for 5 years.
Member.
Thank you. I appreciate the response. Just want to, I think, just a quick language check with respect to capacity building. The capacity for Indigenous people to look after their children has always been there. It's the perspective of the government that has been that we don't have the capacity to look after our own children. The capacity to be able to maintain the kind of relationship with a huge bureaucracy and with a huge administration is the thing. That when we talk about, when the public hears capacity, I want to be very clear that what they're hearing is that we don't have the capacity to meet just the number of staff that the minister has here today is likely twice or three times the amount of staff that any Indigenous community in this province will have on this file. So that's the capacity that we're talking about, to meet the governments at their administrative and bureaucratic. All of that bill that we went through last fall, being able to maintain a staff to be able to deal with going through that and understanding what it means and being able to have it apply in their community. That's the capacity we're talking about, not the capacity for Indigenous people to look after their own children. I'm going to switch gears here a little bit, well, quite a bit actually, to adult eating disorders, which is a question that I've been asking this ministry in a variety of different ways over the last couple of years. The South Island Eating Disorder Program, and the minister knows I've sent a number of letters in this regard, had their services cut during the pandemic and no new funding announced since 2021. Eating disorders, they're not mentioned in the 2023 budget for this ministry. And I think it's important to acknowledge here on the record again that the way that adult eating disorders are handled or are addressed, the programming in Island Health is different than it is across the province. This is the only region in the province where adult eating disorders are administered, programs for adult eating disorders are administered by the Ministry of Children and Family Development. And since MCFD traditionally and historically focuses on youth, the people who receive services from MCFD feel, and we've heard these stories, that the ministry is neglecting the needs for adults looking for support. There's a new study, a Journal of American Medical Association in Canada estimates that because of the pandemic, eating disorders have risen approximately 60%, and with another study showing similar rise in hospitalizations. There's issues around stigmatization of eating disorders, which has only made it worse, the lack of funding for specific treatment facilities on South Vancouver Island. The stories that I have heard, I've sat with people experiencing this very challenging health issue, are horrific and very, very sad. We have been told by the ministry, MCFD, that there is now full staffing, but we have also been told by people who are trying to access those services that they remain insufficient. In budget 2021, $6.6 million was announced. It went to the health authorities. It was already insufficient. And so, I'm wondering if there has been any new funding. And so my question through you, Mr. Chair, to the Minister is, what was the budget for South Island Eating Disorder Program for 2021 and as well for 2022 and 2023? And of those budgets, what portion was specifically designated for adults?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. So the budget wasn't cut. The challenge for the service was that there weren't enough people, there wasn't enough staffing, and so how to prioritise the services being delivered. And so there hasn't been a change in funding. It is now fully staffed, and so the wait list has been reduced. And there is an opportunity now, and there's work going on to align this particular clinic with other models in other health authorities. So we're working with Mental Health and Addictions Ministry, Health, and with Island Health to have a look at the future for the clinic.
Member.
Thank you. So does that mean that there's a potential that this program is moved out of MCFD and into alignment with the other programs, the adult eating disorder programs that are delivered around the province?
Minister.
Well, alignment could mean any number of things, and the discussions are just starting. So they need to do their work and have a look at what some good options would be.
Member.
Thank you. Is there any commitment from this ministry that in the meantime, between now and whatever happens in the future, that the advocates who are here on the lawns of the legislature, their family members, can be assured that they're going to receive the level of services that the ministry has suggested in the letters that they're delivering to these my constituents, our constituents here in the Southern Gulf Island, or Southern Vancouver Island, and Southern Gulf Islands, I'd say, suggesting that levels of services that are being delivered are just not there. Is there any level of assurance that that is the case until we find out what the future of this program is going to be?
Minister.
So the clinic is fully staffed now, and the wait list is going down. So we'll continue to monitor that as we do with all of our services.
Member.
Okay, thank you. I think I'll just bookend this part of my questions just with the frustration that we've experienced hearing the stories, the lived experiences from people, and then advocating on their behalf and getting responses back that from the ministry that suggests something completely else is happening, that the levels of services that these individuals are experiencing, that their experiences are, they're just incongruent. They don't match up. And so that is incredibly frustrating as an MLA, someone who needs to advocate on behalf of my constituents, to have such misalignment between what I'm hearing, the experience from people, and then what the ministry is telling me is being delivered. And I would suggest that there is, despite the fact that there is full staffing, that's been the case now for some time, that those stories continue to be shared with me, that the level of services are far beyond what the promise is and what is needed. Yesterday, another group was on the lawns of the legislature here, the doulas, Indigenous doulas, First Nations doulas. The Doulas for Aboriginal Families grant program from the BC Association of Aboriginal Friendship Centres helps thousands of Indigenous families across the province have healthy, cost-effective birth outcomes. The program allows birth doulas to be centered in communities across the province and support families within and beyond their traditional territory. Many Indigenous families are required to leave their communities due to limited rural and remote healthcare options. They've got to pick up and move their family to a center that has a birthing capacity. The Ministry of Health and the First Nations Health Authority jointly fund this work, but there's also funding that comes from the Ministry of Children and Family Development, according to the advocates that were on the front lawns yesterday. There's a budget of $6 million to help people with a living wage and to help increase the availability of birth doulas across the province. There's also some concern that the work ends once the child is born, but yet with postpartum issues, it would be I think, recognize that having that support go further than just at the birth would be very helpful. You know, I think the reason why I'm standing asking this question in Ministry of Children and Family Development is because specifically with Indigenous families, this ministry has spent an inordinate amount of money over the years separating. We've talked about this in the bill last fall and in previous times, separating Indigenous parents from their babies. Indigenous families have been divided by this ministry. And I'm wondering, will the ministry step up to support the doulas for Aboriginal Families Grant Program, in addition to the partners at the Ministry of Health? Can I be assured that this ministry is going to lead this important program that helps keep Indigenous mothers and their babies and their families together?
Minister.
Oh, thank you, Chair. And I agree with the member. Keeping families together is absolutely vital. And we know that if we can support families to stay safely together, then that's where we'll see the best outcomes for children and youth and for their families and their communities as well. With regard to the particular programme, I'll take that away and speak to my staff and my colleagues.
Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am finished here for this estimates. I just want to thank the Minister for the responses, and we'll also be having conversations with other ministers in and around this doula program, because I think that it's very much something that we should be supporting, and I hope that MCFD has a role in the positive story that these individuals are helping families with. So I hope that the ministry can find a way to be a part of funding this and supporting this program. So, thank you.
Turn the floor back to the member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Thank you, Honourable Chair, and thank you to the Minister and her staff for a quick estimates today. We're done, and the next estimates is at 4 o'clock, so give you a chance to rotate ministers and questioners. Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, I ask the Minister if they would like to make any closing remarks.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. We started off, we had a conversation earlier on today about the Gender-Based Violence Office, and I just wanted to clarify for the member opposite that all of the anti-violence programmes were actually consolidated. They were put together in the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General, and so just wanted to make sure that that was that was clear after the brief conversation we had about that earlier on. It's a great opportunity for me to say thank you again to all of my staff who have been supporting me here, and to all of the staff from the ministry who are delivering services every day out and around the province, and our Indigenous family service agencies and our partner agencies out in community as well. It's a really important time for children, youth and families in the province of British Columbia, as we're making investments in supporting Indigenous communities exercising jurisdiction, supporting children and youth with support needs, many of whom who've never had services before, supporting young people leaving government care who used to be on the superhighway to homelessness and who now have a suite of supports to be able to access, and supporting families to stay safely together. So, as we know, that will lead to the best outcomes for children, youth and families. I'm very honoured to be doing this work, and I thank everybody who came in here today with questions, and appreciate the robust conversations that we've had. Thank you.